everyone. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us, and hope we get done quickly so we don't take up too much of your time. I would also echo what has been said by Amanda and others about the importance of the position that you're in. We're all volunteers here, and I guess I'm prejudiced since I've been doing this for 7 years, but I think it's one of the, if not the most important position at the conference level. It certainly is, at least in most cases, the most time consuming. So we appreciate you volunteering. And as you see the slide on the screen, the Treasurer's Handbook, which we're going to be going through today, is broken into sections. I'm certainly not going to read the handbook to you. I assume everybody there is capable of reading it. What I want to do is hit the highlights. Sometimes it may not be quite clear enough, and I'll try to explain it a little bit. And as the invitation said, this is not a CMS training session. However, it's hard to go through some of this stuff without mentioning CMS. So there's a couple of places I will explain to you how it works in CMS, and I hope you join Saturday where there's actually CMS training, because everything we do today is in CMS. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go to the first section.
Oh, you accidentally muted yourself, Roger. Sorry. Roger, can you hear me? You're on mute.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
Where did I leave off?
From the beginning. You went on mute right away. Sorry, I don't know.
Really? I'm sorry about that. Well, what I said was that we're going to go through the handbook, and I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to try to hit the highlights, explain it a little bit, and if you would use the chat room to ask questions, we'll stop at the end of each section, answer questions, and then at the end, we'll open it up and hopefully be able to answer any questions you have. If not, we'll certainly get the answer for you. So we're going to start with page 5, which is the overview. And most of what we cover in the overview will be in more detail as we go through the handbook. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but a couple of things I wanted to point out. Number one, St. Vincent de Paul, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul is a legal entity, and we all operate under the same 501c designation. We use the same number. So if you're doing grants or any reporting or anything that requires a 501c number, it is the council's number, and we all operate under it. And we all operate under the same tax designation that goes along with that. I get questions from time to time about some treasurers about why we have to do certain things. And one of the reasons is that we have to follow the law. If the IRS says we have to do something, we have to do it. And the next section is audits, which we will talk about in more detail later. But again, some of the requirements, particularly in monthly reporting, we do because that's what the auditors ask for. If we don't send it in monthly, when the external auditors for the council come in to do their annual audit, they will be asking you for that documentation that you haven't turned in. So it's important that when we go through the reporting process that you turn in all the documentation that is required. And one of the principles obviously is that 2 people are required for most all the activities regarding the treasury function. And again, we will go through that in detail when we get to the policies and procedure pages. But from the caseworker entering the the case into the CMS system and generating a check request goes to the treasurer. That's the two people involved in that process. So I think we'll move on to the next section, which is page 6, the operating procedures. I think everyone here is probably in an established conference, and that conference should have written guidelines for both the collection and the disbursement of funds. But on page 6, it talks about the role and responsibilities of the treasurer. And most importantly, you attend the meetings and you inform all of the people in your conference what the financial situation is. And you do that by producing a written report for each meeting. There is no standard format for that report. You can do it on a spreadsheet, you can do it in a word processor, whatever you decide to do, or whatever your conference has a history of doing. I personally use a spreadsheet that mimics the monthly report, so people get used to looking at it in that format, but it's entirely up to your conference. Then there's a section in this page on establishing a new treasurer. I'm not going to read all the way through it because it's pretty clear, but anytime a new treasurer comes in, it's appointed by the president. It's not an elected position. And once you are appointed, then there's some requirements for both the president and the treasurer to go through. And it winds up with a confirmation of new conference treasurer form that's in the appendix. Page A in the appendix is a form that has to be completed by the president and the new treasurer, and it's sent to your district treasurer, and the district treasurer will note it and get the information that he or she needs and then forwards it on to the council. So they're up to date on who all of the treasurers are. If you have any questions about that process, you can put it in the chat room and we will talk about it. But I think it's pretty clear. So if we want to move on to the next page.
Yep. Yeah, no questions yet. I don't see anything in the chat yet, so
Okay.
we'll keep going along.
Okay. All right, operating procedures, collecting, counting, and depositing donations. Like I said, there should be a written procedure already established in your conference. It's a requirement that it be established and it be voted on by the conference. And there is a template in the addendum, the appendices, that you can use to establish your collecting and dispositing procedures. The most important thing, I think, in the procedure is establishing how you're going to count the money. And the main requirement when you count the money is that two people count it. It be done on a count sheet, and there is a sample count sheet in the appendices. You don't have to use that count sheet. You can come up with your own, and a lot of conferences do. But it is a requirement that two people count the money, whether it's a collection in church or if you have a fundraiser, and that the count sheet's filled out and signed by two people. The auditors will check this, I know from experience. So it's important that the funds be kept safe. If the collection is at church and you don't count the money till the following day or so, then it needs to be locked up in, hopefully in the church safe, if not someplace safe. And when it is counted, then it should be deposited in the bank as soon as possible after that count. And the deposit slip should go immediately to the treasurer so that they can know what they've got and enter it into the CMS. And let's see, the written procedure has to be voted on by your conference. And if you don't change your collection procedure, whether it's a collection, second collection at church, or you're collecting at the door, or whatever, then it shouldn't change from year to year. But if it does, it needs to be voted on by the conference. And then at the end of the year, during September, it has to be submitted to the council. And let's see, yeah, just make sure that those count sheets are done, that the count sheets get to you because they need to be turned in monthly, and that you have a copy of the receipts. And all this procedure is in the handbook. One thing it mentions in here, I think that's important, so I'll read it. It says, though working closely together, the Catholic Church and the Society of St. Vincent de Paul are two separate legal entities, and we should keep the financial records and procedures separate. And the Georgia Council requires that donations be counted by at least two persons, and you use the count sheet. So I think we've covered that in detail. If any questions, Amanda?
Yes, Frank did ask, what's the legal name of the council and what is the tax ID number, which Doreen just published in the chat. It's 5809679772. That's also listed in the handbook somewhere. I was looking for what page.
Yeah, I don't remember which page it's on, but it's in the handbook.
It's in there if you ever need to refer to it.
Yeah.
And then the legal name of our council is St. Vincent de Paul, Georgia Incorporated,
Yeah.
Inc.
If you, during your grant application process, a lot of requirements, there are a lot of requirements during that process for documentation on what your designation is. And the council has available letters and copies of IRS forms that you can get to use when needed. So those are good to have on your files anyway.
All right, we'll move on, Roger.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about on pages 8 through 10, recording donations. And there is a recommendation from the council that all donations be recorded somehow or another, probably on a spreadsheet. Now, depending on how you do your collections at church, some of the churches keep track of it and you don't have to keep each individual donors. Some don't. What we do is we track the donors that donate directly to the conference. And then once a year, we get a list from the church of all the donors and amounts. And so there's also a recommendation that we acknowledge each donation. Again, there's multiple ways that conferences do that. We go along with the one-time donation of $250 or more during the year. That's a requirement by the council. And there's some particular wording that we'll go over in a minute that has to be in there for IRS purposes. What a lot of conferences do is they send out acknowledgements and thank you letters if it's over $100. And then what a lot of conferences do is they type up a year-end thank you letter to all parishioners and put it in the church bulletin or have it as an insert in the church bulletin. So there's multiple ways of doing it. I think the important thing here is that if you get a one-time donation of $250 or more, there is a requirement that you send out an acknowledgement letter. We personally call it a thank you / tax letter. We write it as a thank you letter, and then we include the required IRS wording at the bottom. And it says here, Amanda is going to be good enough to send you a template if you would like. You've got her email address there, and you can ask for one and she'll send you one. Let me find the wording here. Can't find it right off. I thought I had it highlighted, but there is wording. I'm assuming it's going to be on your letter, Amanda, what the IRS wording requires. There's a couple of other things we talk about when it comes to donations. You should do at least a yearly, if not quarterly, meeting with your pastor to go over everything that the conference is doing and keep them informed. You can either have a private meeting with the pastor, or in some cases, we've actually gone to the parish council meeting so that the pastor and everybody on the council knows. It's important that your church people know what you're doing for the community and keeping your pastor involved. Some churches have pastors who are heavily involved and give a lot of support to St. Vincent de Paul, and some aren't quite as involved, but they do support us. We have good support almost statewide for that. There's another requirement. If you have a one-time or cumulative donation of $5,000 or more, not only do you have to acknowledge that to the donor, but you also have to let the council know. This is for legal purposes. Actually, that was a new one on me till about a year ago, because we've never had a single donor give us that much. This does not include grants, by the way. I've had that question. These are from individuals. So if you do get somebody that gives you some money, let Amanda know, or Doreen, or both. And another question we get is, can volunteers deduct their time on their taxes? And the answer is no. The value of volunteer services cannot be deducted. So let's see if there's anything else here we need to talk about. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything as far as donations go. It's important that the important thing is that you recognize your donors, and a lot of different ways to do that. So, Amanda, anything you need to add there, or should we move on?
Nope, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. There, I should mention on page 9 in the book, there is a list of things that you should include. That's where the statement is. Part of the statement is that no goods or services were provided by the organization in return for the contribution. It also goes into detail in there about what constitutes a legal donation that's tax deductible by the donor and what's not, particularly when it comes to goods and services and not cash. So the other requirement is that you retain those acknowledgement thank you letters for 2 years. And on another page in the handbook, there is a list of all the requirements for retaining documents. So we'll go through that when we get to it. Okay, now we're going to get to the section on dispersing conference funds. Each conference, just like on the collection, there has to be a second written document with the guidelines. And I don't know, Amanda, if you have a template for this or not, but again, if you're from a conference that's been around for a while, I'm sure they have a current guideline. If you're a new treasurer, what you need to do is read through that guideline and find out if it's up to date. one of the things that goes in there usually is how much what the maximum is that can be considered by a caseworker to give to those in need. Some conferences require that the local conference vote on everything. Some conferences set a guideline like $200 or $300. If it goes over that, then there has to be a procedure for getting approval, whether it's from the president or whether it's from a group or whether it's from the whole conference. So take a look at your guidelines. If they're not up to date, you need to get them up to date, and you need to have the conference vote on it. I know that during the last few months with the problems with the virus in our particular conference, we've increased the amount that we give per case considerably. So we made that change and we voted on it. So at the end of the year in September, you will be required to furnish a copy of that. If there's no change from the year before, you just send in the one that you have and say there's been no change. If there is a change, you need to note it when it goes in so they'll know what you changed. Another requirement is anything over $3,500 requires 2 signatures on the check. And part of the establishing the treasurer is to make sure that you've got at least 2 signees on your checking account. And that way you're covered if you're unavailable, or in the case it's a large check, you need to have 2 signees on it. Next thing is that talking about your checking account, obviously the preferred method is by paper check. Online bill pay is acceptable, and a lot of conferences are doing that now. I've noticed 2 problems with that. Number one is that you need to make sure that whoever is receiving the payment, particularly if it's a utility company, they know who it's coming from. A lot of people on their bill pay, it only says St. Vincent de Paul. And in my case, we use Jackson EMC in our area, and there happen to be 5 conferences that also use Jackson EMC. I'm close enough that I sometimes take checks in, and I constantly get questions to look at something and say, we got this in the mail and just says St. Vincent de Paul, we don't know who it came from. So make sure that when you set up your online bill pay, that your conference's name goes on the check. And there's also a provision to allow the conference to have a debit card. I'm not a fan of debit cards, but some conference uses them. And I think there is a requirement in there that the debit card be limited to 1 person, and their name has to be on the card along with St. Vincent de Paul. The other question I get is, can the conference have a credit card? And the answer is no. Debit card, yes. Credit card is no. Automatic drafts is a no. The only thing I could think of is if you're renting something, or like paying for your phone bill, if it's an automatic payment. But again, that's against policy to have that set up. Another thing that we run into all the time is people wanting to give checks to clients, and also they want to give a blank check to a caseworker or something and let them fill it out. And both of those are big no-nos. Never give a check to a client, always to a vendor, and you never give anyone a blank check. So sometimes not being able to give a check to a client, works a hardship, but if you get creative, there's a lot of ways to get around that. And you never write a check without supporting documentation. Every conference operates differently. I found that out in dealing with a lot of conferences. Some conferences, the treasurers write the check, and some conferences, they have other people writing the check. But it's important that whoever writes the check, that they do it. The way CMS is set up, you should receive a check request in CMS, and we're going to talk about reimbursements in a minute. That's another form. I know that some conferences all operate off of emails. The treasurer will get an email request and the case gets put in later, which is the way they do it. It's not the preferred way, but it's the way they do it. Okay, when you do write a check, you should put the account number and either the case number or the client's name on the check. Those two things should go on every check. In the case of rent, where your vendor is an individual and there may be no account number involved, I would suggest that you put the address for the client in that line. So, and then put the client's name to make sure that you've got all the documentation you need, and whoever gets the check, there's no question about what it's for. There's another one. The next thing on the list here is you never give another check or money to another organization, no matter how worthy the cause. And we run into this all the time, and I'm sure you do too, or your conference does, that people, other organizations come to you and want money. We've had organizations within our church come and ask for money, and all I can tell you is that it's against policy. And the thinking here is that when we solicit donations or we take up a collection in church, people are thinking that St. Vincent de Paul is personally going to use that money to help people in need. And I think that's a good way to go about it. And we can give things other than money. We can give our time. We can help if there's food drives or whatever. We can certainly give our time and help, but no cash. Then we can talk about twinning. Some conferences are blessed with a large church and a lot of donors who share a lot of their wealth with us. And then we have some conferences, particularly in the rural areas, that struggle to meet the needs of the community. And so there is a procedure and there is a place within CMS to do twinning. It's good if that's done through the district president, particularly if you need money from the council. They do have money right now for COVID funds. If you're running short on funds, talk to your district president and they will help you out. In some conferences, we know, some districts, we know which conferences struggle, and we share funds with them when they need it and they ask for it. And the council wants their money because they have to pay dues too, and we have to help support their operation. So each conference is asked to make a solidarity payment each month. CMS has been modified in the last couple of years to do that calculation for you. If your conference takes in less than $50,000 a year in donations and fundraiser, the solidarity rate is 7.5%. If you're over $50,000 a year, then your solidarity requirement is 10%. If you get into a situation in your conference where you don't have any funds, you can let the council know, and you may be behind in making your payment. Just let them know. But otherwise, you should be making that payment monthly. Most conferences make it in arrears. when you close out your month, and at the top of the preview conference report, the calculation is done for you. If you just hit the button that says conference report, it does not. I've asked that be changed because I think it ought to be there all the time, but that's the best way to do it. If you want to calculate it yourself, there are instructions on how to go about it, and that'll probably be covered Saturday in the CMS training, how to go about that. But most conferences will go ahead and close out the month. They will print a copy of the preview report, and then sometime during the first week or so of the following month, they'll go ahead and write their solidarity check and send it in. And we've already talked about domestic tweening, either through the council or individual tweening between conferences. There is also international tweening. And occasionally the council will put out information about that. And it's certainly within the policy to do that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on aid to family members, conference members and their families, because there's a detailed section in the handbook that talks about that. And if it should come up, refer to your handbook. The other thing is that a lot of people think that because we are a charity, we don't have to pay state and local taxes, but we do. I'm not a tax lawyer, but I think the rule is if you are purchasing something to redistribute, then you don't have to pay taxes. If you're purchasing something like a new computer or something for your conference, you do pay taxes. I think that's right, but again, I'm not a tax lawyer, so check with somebody who knows more than I do about that.
So, hi everyone, thank you for joining us. This is really great. Just a FYI, St. Vincent de Paul does not have sales tax exemption.
Okay, that's what I thought. So thank you, Dorian. All right. Any questions on this section? Amanda?
Yeah, we do have a few questions. And then before we go to those, I did want to say I will send out, I do have a template for those disbursement guidelines.
Great.
It used to be in the appendix. I'm not sure why
Yeah,
it's not anymore.
Yes, it's not there anymore.
We do have one, so I'll send that out with a follow-up email to this, and you guys can use it if needed. And like Roger was saying, you know, those are just guidelines to keep everybody on track throughout the year and should be reviewed, but they're certainly, since they are guidelines, they're flexible at the same time. So those special cases that you have, accept those requests from your caseworkers and just discuss them among your board, your conference officers. All right. So Doreen and Patrick were going back and forth in the chat. He asked, can a check without the amount be issued to a caseworker? So kind of like a blank check. Right?
I wouldn't personally. I mean, I could think of a circumstance where that might happen, but that's almost like a blank check when you do that. But you know, I guess if you're going to go buy something for someone to give them and you don't know what it's going to cost, you might want to do that. But in our case, the caseworker would purchase them themselves, and I do a reimbursement.
Yeah, he followed up to say, for example, the caseworker meets the client at a pharmacy to pay for prescriptions. Mm-hmm. They're not sure of the exact amount.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as, well, I like to have a copy of the check. So again, I guess that's going to have to be up to each individual conference whether they want to do that or not. It's the only thing I can tell you.
I suppose Doreen would have input on that as our CFO. Say no.
Look, you already know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
But we can probably figure out a way to make sure that everyone gets what they need. Because I'm thinking they had a debit card, and of course, if maybe copy the check before they give it to the pharmacist and have the receipt, if that in fact was the case. But I would limit those type of transactions.
With that said, it's just, there's no hard rule against it in the handbook. So just
Yep.
use caution, right? I got a private message. This might be more along home caseworker training and home visit training, but we all know Vincentians have big hearts, and sometimes the needs are big, and they come out of personal pockets to help clients out. And so this member is asking any suggestions to have them not do that. It's not the first time we've heard that. We do cover it a little bit in home visit training. It's obviously not recommended that members do it, and it actually just kind of goes against the whole Vincentian spirit of what we do. You know, you're supposed to go to your conference first. If the conference can't provide the help that is needed, we have, you know, we're there to also do other things like provide other resources and provide spiritual guidance, a listening ear, those kind of things. I know it happens, and sometimes even conferences will reimburse the caseworker once they present that case, but then some just come out of pocket. But I don't know, Roger, if you have any insight on that.
We've got one caseworker who does that regularly, and we try to discourage it. We encourage that individual, or any individual that does that, to ask for reimbursement and put a case in so we can keep track of it. Because if you do it just out of pocket, there's no record of it. And you know, when we get to the end of the month or the end of the year and want to know how many people we helped, it's not there. That one gets missed. So I think the proper way to do it, if they do come out of pocket, is to go ahead and enter a case. And we're going to talk about reimbursement, but there's a way to do it so that we get good documentation and we know how many people we've helped. I'll talk a little bit more about it on reimbursements.
Okay. And lastly, talking about not giving money to other organizations, and
Yes.
Tracy asked, is food okay to give to another nonprofit?
Is food?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. You can do that. Excuse me, turn that off.
That is actually one of those workaround ways that we can still support others.
Yeah. Yes, you can collect food and give it to other organizations. We have a food drive once a year for the local food bank, and then you know, the council has their food distribution program, and there are ways to help other organizations. And yeah, so I think there's a way to do it. We do it, and if you need some guidance, you can talk to the council or talk to Daryl that runs the food distribution program too.
Yeah, and that can still be tracked through CMS through in-kind assistance.
Yeah, definitely, there's a way to do that. Yes.
All right, that was it for that section.
Okay, now we're going to talk about reports, and this is an area that people like to talk about, particularly treasurers. Let me get to the right page. Conference treasurers reports. We are responsible for closing the month out in CMS, and again, that'll be covered Saturday in the beginning training. And then once that's done, there are certain documents that have to be transmitted to the council, and that's done by what's called a monthly reporting process. And your reports go to the district treasurer, who reviews them for correctness and any missing documents. Once that package is complete, the district treasurer sends it on to the council. And I found out that different districts have been doing different things, and I think I want to go through what's required at the council level and why. The main reason is, other than financial, obviously Doreen wants those financials so she can put those together, but there are other documents that are required, and they're required for the auditors. And it's one of those pay me now or pay me later. If you don't do it monthly and you are selected to be audited at the end of the year, then you're going to have to go back through 12 months worth of documents and put them together for them. So the handbook has a list of reports that you're supposed to do monthly, and I'd like to go through those individually. So we're going to start with the conference, what's called in the CMS, the conference monthly report. And this is once you balance out the month, and again, that'll be covered in the CMS session Saturday. You go through a closing process, and for you new treasurers, believe me, the current process is so much easier than it used to be. It's almost automatic once you get in balance. And that generates the conference monthly report. And then you get a PDF file, and that's one of them that goes in. The next one that's required is the check register. And in CMS, you simply push a button once your month's closed or before you close an imbalance, and it generates just a copy of your check register. Then on in the handbook, the next thing that's required is a bank statement. Most conferences have the ability to do online banking. I would hope all of them do. And in order to speed up the reporting process, you should go in right at the end of the month after the month's been closed. Usually within the first day or two, you will have available to you at your online banking site your document, your bank statement for the prior month. And you can download it in a PDF format. And that's the document that you should be submitting to your district treasurer. We do have some conferences that are still waiting for the hard copy to come, which sometimes could be a week, and making copies of that. And that slows down the reporting process. So I would highly recommend that you have online banking capabilities and the ability to download that document. The next thing that the handbook talks about is reconciliation. And it goes into some details here. And that's actually been replaced in CMS by the outstanding transaction report. So part of the closing process is to do this reconciliation in CMS through the outstanding transaction report. And you have to do that before you close the month. So once you do that and you're ready to close, or even after you close, you print a copy of that and or save a PDF copy, one or the other. And that's one of the reports that need to go in at the end of the month. And the next document you need to send are a copy of your count sheets. You should be collecting those during the month and scan them into a PDF format and send them in with the rest of the reports. And then to summarize, once you close the month, you should send to your district treasurer your conference monthly report, which is really the financial report, the check register, bank statement, the outstanding transaction report, account sheets, and the deposit slips. If you do it correctly, all of those except the count sheets and the deposit receipts should already be available to you in a PDF format, and you should not have to scan them, because you should be able to save them for a file. I would suggest that you set up a monthly file and save all the reports to that, and then you can easily send them to your district treasurer. You will have to scan the count sheets and the deposit slips, and include those in your report. So one of the other questions we need to discuss is that there is a place on the monthly conference report for the president and the treasurer to sign. And we have some conferences that are holding their monthly reports for the president to sign. And this can delay the reports considerably, particularly if you have a president that travels. So you got a treasurer and a president that travels. We're going to be talking about the need to get these reports in as soon as possible. So the policy is you can submit the monthly conference report without the president's signature and without the treasurer's signature in PDF format straight from CMS. And what you should do is, once you've submitted the report, or as soon as possible after the end of the month, get your treasurer and your president to sign a copy and put it in a file. So at the end of the year, when the council is audited, if the auditors want to see a signed copy, you've got it. You can send it in. We found that if you wait to get your president to sign it, there's two things that happens. Number one, they may not be as urgent about it as you. And number two, occasionally they forget to forward it on, and it delays getting it in. So that's not covered in the treasurer's handbook. That's why I wanted to take the time to go through that.
Roger.
Solidarity pay is due monthly. We've already talked about that. As most conferences pay it in arrears. The annual report is prepared by the treasurer, the secretary. It's actually done by the treasurer. The part that the secretary or the president plays is in the report, which is mostly automatic. There are a few places in there where you have to manually enter some numbers if you choose. So normally what would happen is that once you find out where the annual report is, a new treasurer sometimes has a hard time finding it, and hopefully they will cover that Saturday. But once you find it, if you've closed out September properly, it is a really quick procedure to do the annual report. And then your president approves it, and it goes, I think that one also goes to the district treasurer. So next thing we need to talk about is the internal audit. Once a year, each conference is required to do the internal audit. There are detailed procedures in the treasurer's handbook, and there are the necessary forms. It's page G in the appendices for the forms that you have to fill out. It's what you need to do before the end of the year, if you've never done it before, is to pull out your manual and read through the process. It requires a couple of people who have not been involved in the financial process during the year. They recommend that it not be the president because they've been signing off on things. It can be people from within your conference, or it can be appropriate individuals from outside of your conference. And it's usually two people, and they come in and sit down with the treasurer and go through all of the procedures and the paperwork. There is a requirement that whoever is doing the audit, the two individuals, be familiar with the treasurer's handbook. So what would be appropriate would be to identify the individuals and send them copies of the treasurer's handbook ahead of time, a few days or a week ahead of time, so they can review it. And then once the audit is done, it is due to the council office and the district treasurer no later than September 20th. And now, talk a little bit about the responsibilities of the district treasurer. Basically, the district treasurers are here to help you. That's what we do. If you're a new treasurer, Your district treasurer should be in contact with you. Due to COVID, we're doing everything over the phone now, or you could do a video chat, but the district treasurer can help with new treasurers, and they can help you anytime you get into a problem or run into something that you're not quite sure about. Bounce it off your district treasurer. If they don't have the answer at their fingertips, they can certainly get it for you. I can't stress that enough, that just pick up the phone or send us an email, and we will be more than willing to help you out and probably save you some trouble in the long run. So, and if you do get requests from your district treasurer, it's not because they're trying to make life hard for you. They're trying to keep you out of trouble. And I think you'll find that most of the district treasurers will be really helpful for you.
Let's keep going.
Okay. Funding of grants, protocols for the conferences, and I'll go through this a little bit, and then Doreen, feel free to jump in anytime. So one of the requirements is that all grant applications must be coordinated through the Georgia Council of Development Office. And the reason for that is very simple. A lot of organizations that St. Vincent de Paul gets grants from will only give out a grant once a year. And if a local conference asks for a grant from an organization and gets it, it eliminates the council and any other conference being able to get funds. So there's other reasons for coordinating it, and they can be very helpful. The staff, I'm sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he is very good and very helpful. And if you do have an opportunity and need some help, or you need money and want to know how to do grants, the folks at the council can be a big help to you. And I think, I don't know how much is going to be covered in the Saturday session, but obviously if you get a grant, you're going to have to report on it either quarterly, 6 months, or whenever you spend all the funds. And the way I do it is a spreadsheet. I keep track of every check that we write against that grant. And you obviously, the grant money goes in with all of your other money, so you need a way of knowing what funds you've spent against that grant. And right now, a spreadsheet is the way that we have to do it. There's nothing in CMS that'll do that for us. So you can come up with your own way to make sure that you have the documentation that you need in order to turn in the final report for that. And there is quite a bit of paperwork involved if you get a government grant. And I said I wasn't going to talk about CMS, but I will a little bit here. There is, when you enter a grant, the funds into CMS as a credit, there's a drop-down menu, and there is a separate line for government grants and another for non-government grants. So you need to make sure that you entered in the right place. This is particularly for annual and reporting, because there is a line on there for government grants, and the council and the national organization need those funds set out separately. So I think Pepe will cover that Saturday, hopefully. But if you got a question about that, check with Doreen or check with your district treasurer. Anything else? We'll move on. The best practices part of this is in the handbook is tracking donor information, and we talked about that. Verifying client bill information prior to making payments. CMS makes that very easy. We do have some conferences that are doing it entering CMS after the fact. It's not the way CMS is set up, but every conference does it differently. As long as you've got the paperwork and it's been verified that it's a proper payment, you're in good shape. And keeping track of gift cards. There, you could do it on a spreadsheet, and there's also a new feature that was added sometime this year that allows you to account for gift cards in CMS, which we weren't doing before. We weren't getting credit for it. So each conference sets up their own method of tracking gift cards. The recommendation is that you keep it on a spreadsheet and you do it by card number and et cetera. So check with the treasurer's handbook, and there's some guidelines in there on how to do that. Any questions on that section?
Yeah, some of that stuff will be covered Saturday.
Yeah.
The demo.